Hey everybody, this is Rob Archangel of Archangel Inc., www.archangelinc.com. And today I want to talk to you about audiobooks and the nature of human learning. I would say a few years ago even, I started moving away from reading. I read a lot as a kid and started feeling a little bit bad about the fact that I didn't read a whole ton. Especially as someone who founded a publishing company and who worked in the world of words and writing, I would say that a lot of my reading was actually shorter articles, sports articles, and comment boards and that kind of thing. And felt some guilt over that, particularly because I've always been interested in ideas. I've always been interested in communication. I've always been interested in trying to understand things. I still communicated a lot. I still emailed a lot and communicated over the phone, and did a moderate amount of writing and written communication, but ultimately wasn't reading as much as I used to, and felt kind of bad about that. Several months ago, I saw and listened to the podcast of Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan, and listened to a lot of Peterson's points. I've been listening to a lot of his work subsequent to this, and at some point I plan to talk more about it. But one of the points that he made, which I thought was really powerful and really struck a chord with me, was we as humans have only been reading for maybe 500 years or so for the broad scale, across humanity. And even so, there might be, I don't know the figures, but it wouldn't surprise me if there are multiple billions of people who are non-literate today. And so, in a way, reading is still not very quintessential as a way for us to understand and interpret information and digest it and make sense of it and have an impact in our lives. In fact, David Abram wrote a book in The Spell of the Sensuous about non-literate cultures, and from what little I have encountered about it, he points out that there are a lot of advantages to being non-literate that we don't always think about. We presume that writing and reading is necessary as a way for us to archive and make sense of information and disseminate information, and certainly is very powerful, and there are a lot of advantages to it, but there are potentially some disadvantages. I think even back in the classical period, there was Plato and Aristotle, maybe, I might be making that up, was talking about some of the faults and disadvantages of reading, and that it essentially undermined our ability to remember and retain information. You kind of outsource it and then you forget it. There's a story, think about the Australian Aborigines, and they would have these very long, intricate storylines or song lines across the outback, across this vast expanses of desert, and they would correspond with markers in the landscape and things that were going on. And it's always kind of astounded the ethnographers who spent time with them that they were able to remember all of this information being non-literate. How could these people who were so dumb that they couldn't read be able to remember so much about the landscape? And one of the things allegedly they communicated was, it's not that we don't want to read or are not smart enough to read. It's that reading makes you dumb, makes you forgetful, was sort of the gist of the idea. Now, I don't know if that's entirely true, but I like the principle of it. Anyway, going back to Jordan Peterson, one of the things he pointed out was that, we've been reading as a species pretty widely for maybe 500 years since the Gutenberg press, but we have been listening to other humans speak, to people tell stories and communicate information forever, essentially, for as long as we've been here. And listening is in some ways much more fundamental as a way to to digest information, to get more data about our environment, to encounter ideas, to make sense of the world. And Peterson also points out that that listening, in so much as it's part of a dialogue, is one of the ways that we think. It's actually, a way that we can make sense of our own minds and We might have a concept in our head. Maybe we have it, even on the paper. But when we put it out there, when we speak it, we kind of wear it as an article of clothing. Say, well, how does this fit? Does this feel like me? Does this feel true? Does this resonate as true? One of the things that Peterson talks a lot about is recognizing and identifying how to identify truth as you understand it. And it's a physiological thing. You can sort of feel yourself tearing apart in the solar plexus, or kind of in the core of your chest, if you speak things that on some level are not true. And incidentally, that's one of the fundamental arguments for free speech, that it's a way to make sense of the world, to make sense of information. And if you don't allow people to speak, you interrupt that process of making sense of the world. And also you send that speech underground. You send those ideas and those concepts away, and you banish them, and you don't give them a chance to actually kind of see the light of the world and exercise themselves, in the sense of exercising demons. So free speech is really important from a psychological standpoint. Anyway, one of the things that he and Joe Rogan pointed out is that you can read probably faster if you're a good reader and an attentive reader. You can read and probably retain a lot of that information better and more quickly if you are reading as opposed to listening. But it's a practice that requires all of your self, all of your body, all of your attention. You can't really read and do other things simultaneously, whereas listening, you absolutely can do other things at the same time. You can be eating, you can be making food, sort of fundamental human activities. But, you can be tidying up around the house, you can be exercising, you can be traveling, you can be running or in your car or so forth. And I've actually listened to a lot. That's one of the principal ways that I get my information. I listen to podcasts and audiobooks, and I like the medium. It just seems a little bit more accessible. And I like some of the technology that's out there too. Certain applications and programs allow you to listen at a higher rate than standard, and kind of modulate to some extent that ingestion speed and process. If you listen to something at 25% faster than recorded, or 40% or 60% or 200%, you can get that information a little bit more readily. You can kind of acclimate your ear and your mind to the pace that's being conveyed, and still get a lot of that same content and information than if you were listening to it at one speed or at 100% of the speed, and not spend as much time. So you can modulate that a little bit in a similar way as you can modulate your pace of reading. But anyway, that's kind of the idea that I wanted to communicate today, that audiobooks in some ways are this extension of a very fundamental way of human understanding and knowing, and being acquainted with ideas and information. And podcasts and all of these sort of audio technologies are really powerful, really meaningful. They allow you to do multiple things at once, and can incorporate them into a daily practice, even if you have other things going on. And so I'm a big fan of audiobooks, and I see a lot of promise and future in them, especially for people like me who have, I would say, struggled with spending time and actually doing some focused, dedicated reading. When you have difficulty focusing and don't have the attention span to sit down and dedicate, even 15 or 20 minutes, let alone an hour or multiple hours to a single bit of writing. You can listen to things in the background, do other things, be productive, and still be acquainted with ideas. So anybody who is out there who is interested and curious in ideas, but who finds that they struggle with reading, as I have, absolutely consider podcasts and audiobooks as a way to expose yourself to new information. That's it. Again, check us out at www.archangelinc if you have any independent self-publishing needs, and I wish you guys the best.